Welcome back to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Josh Taylor in tonight for Bob Pompiani. Joined in studio by Gene Collier from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Taking your phone calls, 412-575-2600. Also taking your tweets at Josh Taylor HD. Gene, before we take some calls or maybe some tweets, I wanted to ask you about something I brought up earlier in the show. The NCAA adopting some rule changes as far as eligibility for players and players being able to allow to hire agents and undrafted underclassmen being able to return to school. A big shift there in a policy that I think quite a few people have thought needed to be changed or probably shouldn't have been touched to what became the one and done rule when everything kind of got switched around within the last decade or so. But I know there's a lot of people that have been calling for some kind of shift there. Wanted to get your thoughts on just that particular change. That's
well, these kinds of things, Josh, are obviously growing partly out of the Condoleezza Rice Commission and in response to, as you mentioned, the scandals in college basketball, and you're really looking for a new kind of landscape in that sport. But at the same time, the advent of gambling and what's going to be, obviously legal and readily available ways to bet on college sports, they don't really know what to do about that. They think they want an integrity fee. That's almost kind of a laughable.
Kind of oxymoronic, isn't it?
Yeah,
integrity
we'll let you
gambling.
bet, but we need you to give us an integrity fee. So yeah, I mean, there is going to be a new landscape in the NCAA. Almost any other landscape will improve the situation, in my view. But there's going to be a transition there, and a lot of bumpiness before, they can smooth out into some kind of system that everyone recognizes and is comfortable with.
I'd have to agree with that. Definitely considering the fact that this is probably something that's not done yet. There probably will be tweaks along the way, I would imagine, because they'll run into certain situations that maybe they didn't foresee, and they'll say, okay, we'll have to fix this and nip this and tuck that. So I don't think it's definitely defined or necessarily over in terms of how they plan to define everything. Let's go to the phone lines. Let's go to Bob in Clearfield. Bob, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Hi, gentlemen. Thank you for taking my call.
Thanks for calling in.
I know that it's a little early to make any permanent conclusions, but what we've seen from the first two outings, the fears of myself and I'm sure others are beginning to mount that Chris Archer is a bullpen killer. Yes, they won today, but they had to burn out four relievers a day ahead of a critical four-game series. Now, when you compare that to two impressive outings on the part of Tyler Glasnow, plus he said an up-and-coming quality player in Boston Meadows, and he said considered that was expected to be a very high-quality Class A player to name later. This could be an awfully expensive trade just to go 83 and 79 over the next couple of seasons. So I have concerns. I'm sure others do.
Bob,
thank you very much for your time.
I have a question for Bob. And Gene, this, I guess it becomes more hypothetical since Bob hung up. Would he have preferred as if they hadn't made a trade? Because if they hadn't traded for Chris Archer, would he be happy that they didn't make a trade at all?
Well, I mean, this is one of those things where it sounds like you want to be able to make this trade, but you want some kind of guarantee that it's going to work out.
And that's not how it works. That's not how it works.
Not work that way. It could go exactly the way you say, and the Pirates will regret it. That's endemic in all trades.
Here's something I'll add to that, because the theory of Chris Archer being a bullpen killer, I believe was the term he used. Here's the thing about Chris Archer's resume.
After two starts, he's one of the top innings guys over the course of his career. Right?
There's only one guy in the last 5 or 6 years who's tossed more innings and started more games. That's Max Scherzer. He might be the best pitcher in the National League.
Yeah, he may have taxed this particular bullpen in these two particular weeks, but I mean, really, you're going out of your way to look for trouble there, I think.
But they also made a trade to add a guy to the bullpen to prepare for this sort of thing. So it's almost like they were ready in case the situation happened. And here's another thing. I'm never going to begrudge a pitcher that even if he only goes 5 innings. I'm never going to begrudge a guy that goes 5 innings, enough to be the pitcher of record, and gives up only 2 runs in Coors Field as the opposing guy.
Yeah.
I will never begrudge a guy that does that.
Not great, but it was fine.
It wasn't great, but you go to Coors Field, you expect the unexpected, and a lot of times you're expecting the worst. And I'm going to point this out again. These 3 guys, Musgrove, Tyone, Archer, with the addition of the bullpen helping these guys out, granted Tyone did his work by himself, the entire pitching staff limited this team, this Colorado team that usually clubs everybody in their home park, to 7 runs in 3 games.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Really, if I had known Tyone was going to pitch a complete game, I'd have stayed up and watched it. You never get to see that anymore.
He was the first Pirate to actually throw a complete game at Coors Field since Oliver Perez in 2004. So that's a stat to you. That's pretty interesting. We had someone else on the phone line, but they left, so we'll take some Twitter questions, Gene. In the meantime, we have Robert who asks, do you think John Bostic can step up and be the Steelers starting linebacker at the inside linebacker position?
I think he will do exactly that. How good he'll be at it, that's another thing. I don't think John Bostic is a stud middle linebacker in the vein of even James Farrier. I don't think he's that kind of player. I think he's an adequate middle linebacker that for a team that really needs those people and doesn't really have them. I think he'll be in there and he'll be fine. He'll be the replacement player, if you will.
I think that's a good way to look at it. I would also consider a guy like John Bostic as more of that newer mold of inside linebacker. They don't want guys that are necessarily bigger, stronger, able to hit guys and just knock them off their block. They want guys that can cover a lot of ground, too, that can really be good in space, and John Bostic's one of those guys. Me personally, now this is just my own assessment of John Bostic and the other guys at that position, including Tyler Matakevich and Vince Williams. My take of it is that we're going to see these guys probably mixed in quite a bit. This team's going to look at the personnel situation. They're going to look it down the distance and say, okay, who's the guy that best fits this situation? And that guy will probably be the one in the game. Or maybe that combination of two guys will be the ones in the game.
I don't think you're going to see a lot of 4 linebackers.
I don't think so either, honestly. I mean, granted, yes, we know the 3-4 is this team's base, in theory. They've played so much out of the nickel in the past couple seasons. They're experimenting with two interior linemen, 2 edge rushers, and 7 defensive backs. They're going to mix up a lot of different things here, and I think it's going to be really, really varying as far as the different things we'll see. Another question coming from Brian on Twitter who says, what's the deal with Joey Cora? He's worse than Rick Sofield, who was worse than Nick Leyva. So I'm serious. And this is not a new thing to hear criticism of Joey Cora. It's been going on quite a while, but yeah, he had another one today. Got Francisco Cervelli thrown out, Gene. So I imagine there's been some building frustration as far as Joey Cora and his decision making.
Yeah, he's had some curious calls, and he's been more talked about than any third base coach on this or any other show for a while.
Which, by the way, it's hard to top Rick Sofield.
Yeah,
it's hard to do that,
and that's probably not a good thing. But again, it's one of those things that he obviously only ever gets talked about when somebody gets thrown out. Nobody ever calls the show, boy, that was a great send by the third base coach. That usually doesn't happen.
That was a great button signal he sent in. I wonder what his indicator is. Like, you never hear stuff like that when it comes to third base coaches. But I think your point is valid. I think the fact that, when you see that many mistakes made, what's the old adage about offensive linemen? You're not going to hear their name called unless they make a mistake. Kind of along those same lines. But I will say this much, though. Joey Cora has been a guy who's been in this game for a long time, both as a player and as a coach. And I think that's one of the reasons why Clint Hurl trusts him, because he's been around this for so long. And let's not kid ourselves. A lot of guys on this staff are guys that are, you don't want to call them baseball lifers, but it's the closest equivalent you're going to find is the guys that have been in the game for a long time.
Yeah, and he was kind of noted for that play with Polanco a couple of weeks ago, where Polanco didn't go. Remember that?
There's also that, too. Yeah, there's the one call he didn't make, so that stands out as well. Got to take another break. We'll answer more questions when we come back. Stick around.